Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rangers Review. It is Thursday, the 1st of May. Chris, I didn't know we're into May. Joshua, Barrie and Chris Jack here to talk you through all the latest Rangers news as ever. No Derek Clark today, no idea what he is up to, but he's not with us, so we will see you through your 9:30 morning briefing as ever. A quick reminder before we get into this video is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If you're looking to hand in your own transfer request at work, they have thousands of options right across the Central Belt. Go to the links below the video if you want to find out more. Chris, Jack, how are you? You look like you've been enjoying the sun.
It's been a nice couple of days, so making the most of it. A bit of gardening on the go, with some green fingers to match my blue nose. Apart from that, all fine. It's been an interesting couple of days, but a busy couple of days, and hopefully people have enjoyed the piece that's on the site this morning. That I'm sure we'll discuss at some point over the next half hour.
Yeah. Good morning to everyone in the chat. Loads of people commenting today, Chris, which is great. Always great to have so many people joining us. Loads to get into as ever. It's been I was speaking to someone, funnily enough, yesterday, who doesn't really follow football that much, and they were saying, so in the summer, do you just when there's no games, do you just kind of what do you speak about? And I said, there's always, even on the days where you think there's nothing to talk about, it is never quiet at Rangers, and no so more at the moment. Chris, we're going to get into your piece on the website today discussing Kevin Thelwell in a bit more detail. Rangers' new sporting director. There will also be a piece of disappointing defeat at home for Rangers women last night to Glasgow City. Stevie Clifford was there for us, and you can read his thoughts from the game and the implications of that defeat slightly later on the Rangers Review. But Chris, first and foremost, you've been doing some digging on Kevin Thelwell. We'll have more coverage in the next week or so discussing exactly what the impact of his appointment will be in the short term, because he's not officially started this job, but there's obviously a transfer window to plan, and there is a manager to appoint, two pretty big jobs to walk into. He becomes Rangers sporting director after 2 years operating without one. Again, we can get into some of the implications, decisions around that, and why Rangers have eventually gone back to the model. But tell us a little bit about what you found out speaking to some people who have worked with him or seen him work or have known him, and maybe first of what type of character Rangers are bringing into what is a really significant job. It's not an easy one to walk into after a few years battling relegation with Everton, is it?
Just on the previous thing you said there, people asking you about, what do you do during the summer? I don't know how many times over the years I've had that conversation. It's it must be really quiet. Trust me, up here it is never ever quiet. There's always something to keep us on the go. I had a meeting with someone yesterday and talking about what's likely to be ahead over the summer. And I don't think it's going to be I think it's going to be a quiet one. And I think there'll be plenty to keep us amused. And as you've touched on there, a lot of it will revolve around Kevin Thelwell and the job that he is able to do, the job that he's been tasked to do as Rangers sporting director. Now, we wrote a lot about this on the site, discussed it a lot on the videos before he was appointed after Patrick Stewart, and he made that announcement of, here's why Rangers need one. They have now finally got one. And for me, I think one of the big things to come out of the process, and from speaking to a number of people about Thelwell over the last few days, it's almost a departure from how Rangers have operated of late. And I mentioned this in the piece. It's not a James Bisgrove, you're appointing someone into a job they've never done, or Zeb Jacobs appointing someone into a job you've never done, but appointing Michael Beale with very little of a track record. And Kevin Thelwell, you're appointing a guy who has always been a sporting director, or has always been in these football business type roles. You're not taking a chance on someone hoping that he knows what he's doing. Now, that's not to say it's a guaranteed success. It might not work out. He might have a great career here. He might not. But you're mitigating that risk by not going too far away from, here's the identikit, here's what we need, here's a guy that ticks all the boxes, let's go and appoint him. So I think in general, it's an appointment that makes a lot of sense. One of the main guys I spoke to for that piece was James Cooper, the former Sky Sports presenter. He sat down with Thelwell for a really interesting podcast interview to discuss his life and times, and obviously really focus on his time at Everton. And one of the points that came across from that, and a number of guys I spoke to, was he's a nice guy, he deals with people in the right way, but don't mistake that for a softness, or don't mistake that for someone who's not completely driven and who's got real ideas of how things should be done. So hopefully people find that as quite an interesting insight into the man, as well as the guy that is actually now going to oversee this football operation. And as we both know, there's just a wee bit of work needing done on that particular operation.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. What I found interesting, Chris, speaking to a few people about Kevin Thelwell, was that he comes into a club that, Johnny and I were discussing this, I think yesterday or a couple of days ago in the podcast. You go back to October, and Rangers have an interim chairman, they have an interim CEO in George Letham and John Gilligan. They don't have really any other infrastructure apart from the executives that are still in place. But in terms of the phrase we always go back to, who's over the manager, who's leading things, who's the one that's tasked with direction, not only has the structure changed a lot, but the people leading the structure has changed a lot. So you need stability, but you're now coming into quite a different situation where there's going to be a lot of voices, whether that be the ownership model with the likes of Andrew Cavagna and Parag Marathi, whether it be Greta Steinson, who is obviously the 49ers technical director. The 49ers only have one other club at the moment, which is Leeds United, and Steinson's expected to be quite a visible presence at matches going forward and around the club a fair amount. Maybe not day-to-day at the training ground, but you'll certainly have an influence and have a voice. And you've also got the ongoing recruitment with Niels Koppen, and the fact that Thelwell isn't coming into the club in the same way maybe a year and a half ago, where there was the recruitment department had maybe suffered a little bit or hadn't. It has now been restructured quite dramatically, and we can talk, and we will over summer, about how good recruitment has been. I think that it's difficult to judge elements of it because of how poor the team have been. Some people will say, well, that's because of the players signed. But largely, I think Rangers have signed quite a few young, exciting players. Do they need a lot of work on their squad? Yes, but there's clearly, when you look at the signings of Ham Zigerman or Jeff D. Clinton and Ciala, there's a framework in place there to bring some good players into the club. You now need to, I guess, add on to that and having some actual money to really properly invest in talent comparably should help too. But Thelwell, do you think he's someone that's going to come in, and while it will be his way because he's a sporting director, he's the one leading the club, he's also going to have to work in some difficult environments, as he's done at Everton, and work with a lot of different voices too. And in particular, if you go back to his time at Wolves, when George Mendes was quite an influential figure there, he probably has that experience of, yes, getting his own way, but also working collaboratively with people, which will probably be important in this upcoming summer at Ibrox.
I think there's always a tendency when fans can look at a sporting director, it's really judged on recruitment. If players are good, it's judged that the sporting director has done a great job. If the players are bad and the team's unsuccessful, then the sporting director has failed. His remit will be more wide-ranging. It's going to encompass the men's and women's first teams, but the academy, sports science, medical, and obviously recruitment. But as you've outlined there, he's not coming into a recruitment department that is not really fit for purpose. A lot of work has been done. You've outlined that well on the site over the last year or so, about adding people, about changing processes, about changing how they scout players, about changing the markets that they're looking for players in. So he's coming into a structure there that is in a better place. Now, the club, of course, as a whole, is not in a good place. He's got so much room for improvement. I'm sure there'll be a lot of focus on the work he's able to do in the medical department and in sports science, because Rangers have really suffered from that over recent seasons. But I think it would be wrong just to say if the signings are good, Kevin Thelwell deserves a statue built. If the players are rotten, then he deserves to be chased out of Glasgow. There has to be this nuance when you're discussing sporting directors, because Rangers, they've had a number of cracks at this particular role. They've not really got it right in its various guises over the years. And another thing that stood out for me, going through a number of interviews for that piece, he seems to have left every club, and the fans are fairly happy with the job that he did. I think there was a disappointment when he left Wolves, to go over to America and work at New York Red Bulls. His time there was really curtailed by COVID. He couldn't really have the impact there that he wanted. Goes into Everton. I think Everton fans on the whole are fairly comfortable with the job he did there as well. They're obviously under new ownership themselves. They decided to go in a different direction, and he's then made this move. But I think if you're to ask Rangers fans, how would you judge the various figures that have been in place over the last 8, 9, 10 years or so in this particular role? There's probably not a huge, overwhelming majority that would say, I'd be really sad to see him move on. So I think that probably gives a bit more of an insight into the job that he does, not just a recruitment sense, but the job that he has done building up all these clubs, taking Wales from a side that was on the brink of being relegated to League One to Europa League. So the time in New York was tricky because of outside influences, but Everton, as you mentioned there, some really difficult circumstances he's had to work under there, change of managers, the points deductions, fighting against relegation, all against the backdrop of needing to be a Premier League club so they can move into this new stadium. So he has had a lot on his plate, certainly of late. I think he's probably got a wee bit more on his plate now, that's probably safe to say.
Yeah. We'll get on to some comments and some discussions about Red Bull and these links that are coming up. Chris, I know you were on the BBC podcast of the day that had some interesting talking points. A couple of contrasting points here about recruitment. John says Coppin has given us a team that's 17 points behind Celtic, ? Null FC saying, John, it's not really him, is it? Not those who set the budget, pick the team, play in the park. This is why I think, Chris, I'm more in this comment's favour on Rangers recruitment. Recruitment's always a hot topic, isn't it, at football clubs, and you need to get it right. Rangers slashed their wage bill pretty dramatically last summer. I think they have unearthed a few real gems. Someone like Igaman, who will return a lot of money on his investment, not easy to do. Jeffrey will make a lot of money, I think, in the future as well. But for me, this is why a sporting director is so important, because you need someone who influences the manager's decision-making, influences, okay, are we going to play in Ciala between now and the end of the season? Are we going to play Igaman in his favourite position between now and the end of the season? Links to the departments. And you started to see that, I think, at the turn of the year with the youth academy changes that we've discussed before. Rangers have a very young second team now, who obviously won the Glasgow Cup the other night, didn't they? But only 3 players who started in the December final started the other night. It's a young team as they try and expose these players to these games earlier. But it needs to all be linked, from outgoing contracts to renewals, to academy pathway, to those coming up from the second team like Finlay Curtis and Bailey Rice. I think this is why a sporting director is so important, Chris, because it's not going to be, as I understand it, that Thelwell is the kind of hands-on scouting role and is picking the next players. It's about having an idea of where you're going, as Rangers did last summer, but then from the top of the club, sticking with that and saying, right, how do we create the environment for these guys to really flourish? How do we put a manager in who's going to have a style of play that allows them to really flourish? Because over the course of the campaign, the Rangers squad haven't had that. And yes, they must take a lot of responsibility, I think, and ownership for, I thought they looked like they checked out quite a lot against St Mirren. They've played themselves into that position. But they also need a consistent managerial voice with a playing style that's going to work for them to give them the best chance of success. And that's not been the case for a long time. So it is Thelwell's role to take recruitment and, you know, the what the manager wants to do. Club DNA is something that a lot of people behind the scenes at Rangers speak about just now. They've not had this club DNA of, this is our playing style, this is what we're recruiting for over a number of years. I think it's still been too chaotic to properly judge. And Thelwell's job is to try and create some stability to allow any ideas to ultimately work over time, because it's not going to work over a 6-month period. Football just doesn't work like that.
No, it is going to be, every Rangers fan that's watching and that tunes in and that reads the site, they will want immediate success. It's not going to be immediate success. Now, Rangers may well have short-term success, but it's not just a case of a one-hit wonder. Rangers have to build for long-term planning and have long-term aspirations. And that can only happen if there is a clear structure and a clear plan right throughout the football club. So not a case of the manager is looking after the manager, recruitment are looking after recruitment, and the academy are looking after the academy. And as long as they do their wee bit, everyone's happy. That's not how it can work. It has to be a wider scope. And Kevin Thelwell will come in there really as the glue almost that has to hold all these areas together and make sure that they are all pulling in the same direction. They're not just out for themselves. One of the themes again of that piece, James Cooper told me that his standards are meticulous, but he is also accountable, and he will empower people. He will give people their chance to go and have their influence and make their mark. But if they're then not hitting the standards that he expects and are not doing the right things that are for the betterment of the club as a whole, then he will pull them up over it, and changes will then be made. And that's what Rangers have to have. For too long, it's felt too kind of wayward in terms of the thinking. There's not been that clear strategy. There's not been that clear DNA, to use the phrase that you used. And Rangers need to get back to that. You could only be a successful club in the longer run if you have all these departments joined up and thinking in the right way. And I think that's something I think that the fans will take a bit of heart from. There's going to be a lot of changes over the course of the summer. There will be. There's so much talk about transfer budgets and money that's going to be spent. Yes, of course, that's important. This squad does need investment. But for me, the big opportunity that comes with takeover and regime change is a chance to put different people in place and put different processes in place to work in different ways. And if Rangers can get all of that right, then the money and the success all almost falls into place. There's no point in having a huge wage bill and a huge transfer kitty if you're not going to spend it wisely. And that's the case that we've been in for far too long.
Yeah. And just going back to the team, it's a team that needs, like, if you look at last summer's business and you take Chefty and Ciala, Igaman and Cherney, ones that have worked, others like Proper and Bayrami haven't. It's a team that badly needs 3 or 4 players to build around, 3 or 4 experienced players. And that's probably where the real investment comes in. That's the money that the Rangers have not had. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on, Chris, to a few comments. A comment here from a friend of the show, Dave Fulton, says, I listened to Chris on the Scottish Football Podcast the other day. Chris spoke well, as usual. There you go, Chris. It was interesting to hear the Leeds podcaster's view on the 49ers enterprises. Tell us a bit about that, Chris. Obviously, you were on this podcast the other day. Not to point people away from it just now. Hopefully, they'll watch the end of the stream. But tell us a little bit about the discussions you were having about what Rangers should expect and Rangers supporters should expect from these guys being at the top of the club and directing things.
I didn't say anything on that podcast that I've not said on this show or written on this site. The Rangers Review family are always the people that get my news and opinions first, so people don't need to worry about that. It was interesting to hear it from a Leeds perspective. Again, that's something we had on the site in the immediate aftermath of this story coming out, and there was a lot of excitement about the 49ers impact and the impact they've had at Leeds. Safe to say Leeds have had a really good season, all going well.
Yeah.
They will go up as champions this weekend, and that was the ambition. When the 49ers took over at Leeds, that was the ambition. They've backed their manager, they put a lot of money into the wage bill. I think they've recruited well, as was outlined on that show. They've recruited quite smartly. It's not been a case of throwing money at it. They've got guys who can just do a job in the Championship. That might not be the same squad that does a job for them in the Premier League. There will be changes there, I'm sure, over the summer. But they've recruited well for the task in hand, and that's almost what Rangers have to do as well. You have to recruit well for the task in hand, and that is recruit well for Scottish football. Too many of these players don't have the attributes that are going to make them successful in Scottish football. That has been a failing of the recruitment, I think, over not just last summer, but for a number of summers now. That has to change, and I think that will be a lesson that Rangers do learn from Leeds. One of the points on that show was this, something that we've discussed and knocked down, this feeder club idea of who will be the big dog in the partnership, if you like. Now, will Rangers be the feeder club for Leeds or vice versa? That's not how this relationship is going to work. Leeds have their own ambitions, have their own budgets, have their own staff, stand alone in their own right, and clearly Rangers do as well. Will there be best practice shared between both clubs? I'm sure there will be, just like there can be best practice in sports science or medical shared between Rangers and the 49ers. If there's something happening in the NFL that Rangers feel could be beneficial in terms of injury recovery or injury prevention. They now have access to that. They now have access to that in San Francisco. They now have access to that in Leeds, and that's again one of the benefits of this partnership. So for me, it's not just about outline there. It's not just about money. It's about what else can you do to really make Rangers operate and be run and be successful, but in a different way than they have been of late. So it was a really interesting chat. That I'm sure we'll have more on that on the show and on the site over the coming months to really see how this relationship works. So people will say feeder club and parent club and that type of stuff. That's not the structure. That's not why the 49ers are involved. That's not why Andrew Kavanagh is involved in Rangers. They're in Rangers for a Rangers perspective and for Rangers' sake. They're in Leeds for a similar thing, but on that particular side of the coin.
Yeah, and the other big job they're going to have to get right, Chris, is appointing the next Rangers manager. That's a big task, isn't it? We're led to believe it's going to be a combination of Thelwell and also Greta Steinson, amongst others, making that decision. Obviously, Patrick Stewart as the CEO will be involved too. Some of the names, Chris, that are hot on the press, is that what you say? On people's lips, whatever it is, among others, Stephen Gerrard, Marco Rose, Sean Dyche, Russell Martin. We're going to have more coverage again of this topic on the site over the next few days. It's a big task, isn't it? Because some people would come with a viewpoint that you just need stability for a season to tighten this team up, to strengthen them, and then move on to the more ambitious appointment. I'm more in the camp of you might have some short-term pain, but start the process, start the journey now, because Rangers have had effectively, and this season has effectively been a wasted season because they've not got their managerial appointments right. Is that fair, or do you just want to see a locked up style of football for a year to see Rangers beat the teams in the Scottish Premiership they've not been able to consistently this campaign?
If it's a locked up style of football, does that mean I need to do a tactical analysis? Because you'll just wash your hands of the whole thing. If it's 4-4-2, big man, little man, you're not getting involved.
Well, Chris, all I'll say is I did it this year, and as you know, rewatching the Rangers games is normally that's not. Yeah. This season in particular, actually, I've not even watched the St Mirren game back. Is there anything to learn from that? I don't know.
No,
anyway, I've interrupted you.
Don't bother. I think that's the before we get into talking about names and budgets and all the rest of it, Rangers have to decide almost what do they want from the first part of this new era. I say we've outlined there that 49ers and Kavanagh is a long-term project. That doesn't mean to say they're going to write off the first 3 seasons and say, well, we'll try and get this right and we'll tweak this and we'll tweak that. They're coming in fully aware of the need that Rangers fans have, the desire that Rangers fans have to win. You don't get to finish second in this league and get away with it without questions being asked. So they will be fully aware of that. And that's almost the biggest question they have to ask themselves first and foremost. Do you want a steady pair of hands, to use that old phrase, that can just beat the rest of the teams and get you within touching distance and maybe give you a shot at the title? Or do you see the first season as the first season of a new era and a new style of play and a new ethos? And if you go with a steady pair of hands for the first season, 2 seasons, are you then almost wasting time? Are you wasting the opportunity? Do you go slow and steady, or do you go clean slate and say, right, this is the way we want a manager that's going to play in this style. He's going to have this philosophy in terms of youth development. He's going to play with a younger squad. Or do you get someone in who says, I want guys that know the Premiership, that won't be fazed by going to Dundee or playing on the plastic pitch at Killie, and that can just take care of business in these matches. So before we get into names and all the rest of it, Rangers need to decide that on that question. Once they've answered that question, that then takes you into, like, you're going down one path. You then start looking at a profile of a manager in terms of age and background and success, and whether he's worked under a sporting director before, his track record in youth development, his track record in the transfer market. All of those things are they're really, really important. Of course they are. but they're almost secondary in terms of the process. So if you're sitting down and you're a blank sheet of paper saying who's going to be the next Rangers manager, there's no point in sitting writing down Dyche, Gerrard, Rose, Martin, McInnes, anybody else that you want to throw in and tell us, because you have to answer those bigger questions first.
Yeah. A comment here from Ian Chisholm, which I agree with. Pick a style of play and pick a manager to suit it. Some people will disagree with that, I sense. But I don't think that means, Chris, that you need to have, okay, we're only going to play a 4-3-3 with fullbacks moving inside and we're going to be rigid with that. But from a recruitment point of view, what style of player are you recruiting for at the moment? What is the club's, when Gerrard was here and he was here for a number of years, you knew that. But what is this overall idea? And you've seen the difficulties when you go from Gerrard to Gio and Gio to Beale and Beale to Clement. Your recruitment is only caught up with what said manager kind of wants by the end of the time they're here. So you need to have a vision that you go with and then commit to that. Pre-season at the end of June, Chris, that's when this new regime will want a new man in for, is it not? Because there's not much time to get things right ahead of the new season, is there? This is a quick turnaround, even though Rangers season's ending prematurely because they're not in the Scottish Cup final. No,
time is very much of the essence, but that doesn't mean to say that they will make decisions just for the sake of it. If you think roughly when the Champions League qualifiers will be, you then almost count back, we need 2-3 friendly games, and then to count back, I need a fortnight of pre-season. That's taking you into a time frame that's not that far away. I think we've seen with the appointment of Thelwell as sporting director, Rangers are not just like in this state of flux and are not doing anything while the takeover paperwork continues to be checked and signed and sent back and forth all around the world. Rangers are still planning for next season, even though the takeover is not complete. So if it's still several weeks away before the takeover is done, it doesn't make a massive difference. Our planning is still going on. Things still will happen, and that's, obviously we've seen that with Kevin Thelwell. A manager will still be appointed. They're not going to sit on their hands for X number of weeks, wait till the final bit of paperwork has been signed and the statement is on the website, and then think, right, we've got something to do. Let's go and try and find the manager, and we need to go and try and find a training ground for pre-season. And by the way, we need 10 players. That process will all still be ongoing. So again, people obviously saw the consortium as you reported on the website the other day there. People also saw the consortium at Ibrox. Another indication that this is very much on track, as we've said all along. Suggestions of this being done within the next couple of days, wide of the mark. It's not going to happen. We're still talking weeks rather than days. But that doesn't mean to say that things are not still on the go and things are not still happening in the background. So I get that people want the big announcement. They want the thing on the club website. They want us to report it. They want the scarves above the head picture, as we always say with transfers. That will happen in time, but just going to give people time to work through the processes that have to be worked through.
Yeah, they just want the tweet from you, Chris, that it's done. That's what they want. Imagine the bookmarks, but you're right. This is a takeover that has been in the works for a long time, and it is not a case of no discussions are being had until it is official. Put it that way. And definitely a busy few weeks to follow. A few more comments before we close. Declan saying Marco Rose's style suits the players we have. Gaz Jones, we need a manager who can beat the low block. That's a must. And Michael saying, surely Gerrard is a step back. I think the 49ers will want to move forwards, not backwards. Loads of interesting points we'll continue to get into over the coming days. But loads for you on the website, as ever. Remember, you can subscribe. I think it's still £1 for 6 months. It says so on the ticker below. So if you want the Rangers review to see you through the summer, then do take advantage of that and sign up on the website for all of Chris's latest on the takeover. The transfer window to come is going to be a hectic few months. Until then, we will speak to you tomorrow. Stevie Clifford on with Derek then, so you can look forward to speaking to both of them. Thank you for joining us, and we'll speak to you soon. Have a good day. Bye for now.